Okay, today we're going to talk about the writing process, breaking apart a prompt and successfully answering a prompt. Today we're going to use this example of a prompt to draw comparisons on what is prompting conformity or nonconformity in both the Crucible and Salvation. For this prompt, the criteria that the teacher has set is that it needs to be in 60 words or less. The other part of this assignment is that it has to have logical organization, and so you can't just write stream of consciousness. So in 60 words or less seems like a short amount, and it is, and so it's extremely important that you're choosing your words and organizing your argument in a very specific way. This could easily be a 4-page paper, a 10-page paper, 30-page paper, but for today it's just 60 words or less. So the first thing that we need to do in order to successfully answer this is we need to break apart this prompt, okay, and understand what it means and what it's asking us to do before we can even go forward. So we have to draw comparisons, which means similarities, on what is prompting conformity or nonconformity. So either one of those in both the Crucible and Salvation. So these two things are what we're comparing, and that means we have to find a similarity, and we have to talk about either conformity or nonconformity. And so there's a lot of things we can do here. Options are endless, and so I'll try to take you through as quickly as I can the process for answering this, okay? Another key important point that a lot of kids struggle with on prompts like this is they don't understand certain words here. So like I said, comparisons is similarities. That's a synonym for it. Conformity means adhering to society's rules and what society demands of you, and not breaking away from the mores and the rules that your community has set out. And nonconformity is obviously doing the opposite of that, breaking away, doing what you think is right regardless of your community's ideals. And so understanding those two things and how they're used is really critical when you're answering a prompt. Now, obviously, I just want to stress this again. This is clearly for a very specific prompt, but the ideas that I'm talking about right here relate to any prompt you'll ever receive in your entire life. Okay? So let's talk the next step. Okay, so we've broken apart the prompt. That's step number 1. Okay? Step number 2 is now we need to, okay, what do I know about the Crucible? And what do I know about Salvation? These are two different types of text. One is a play, the Crucible is a play. Note that's why it's underlined. And Salvation is a short story, and that's why it's in quotation marks. That's a real easy thing that kids often mix up when they're writing too. It's just a little attention to detail. No big deal, but it's something worth considering. So what do we know about the Crucible? It's about witchcraft. It's about being accused. You can be, you could possibly die from these accusations or judged by your community. Your identity is and your reputation is at stake based off of allegations that other people make about you. Of course, we have Proctor, who's the main character, John Proctor, who's having a lot of internal and external struggles. He's struggling with saving himself, saving his wife. We have Elizabeth, who's another main character, maybe not quite as big as Proctor, but his wife, who has been falsely accused, and Mary Warren, who is their servant. I'm just listing off some main characters because obviously there's a lot in here. We could go on. There's at least 10 other people that we could mention probably. But if I'm thinking about these 3 people, because when we first start reading the play, these are the 3 that we first get to know. All 3 of these people you could talk about with this prompt. Okay, so Proctor, he's definitely struggling with conformity. Elizabeth is not conforming, right? She's the one who gets hauled off to jail, but basically says, I haven't done anything wrong, and I'm not going to give in to these games that you guys are saying. And then Mary Warren definitely conforms because her good friend Abigail is basically holding up the entire community, and if you don't go along with her, then you are definitely against the ideals of the community. Proctor is kind of wavering because he's trying to protect his reputation and his family name, but also now his wife's life is at stake, and so this is obviously a big struggle. So these are some basic nuts and bolts. Obviously we could go further into it, but it's really important that you think about what you know about the topic that you're being asked to write about. And a lot of kids don't do this when they're writing. They try to attempt to write and they haven't really fleshed out their ideas. Now, these are just some quick thoughts. This could take you 2 minutes, depending on how well you understand it. This could take you 20 minutes. And if you've been sleeping in class, this could take you an hour to go reread and review the book or the work that you're reading. That's totally normal, okay? That's very common. In salvation, we know it's about being saved, right? And what that means to a community. There's pressure from the congregation or the community that Langston Hughes is involved in to say that he has been converted, regardless of what he really feels. In salvation, of course, the story goes that and he is, of course, the main character. He would clearly be the easiest one to discuss because it's a narrative written from his point of view, so he would definitely be the character to talk about. Although I suppose you could argue his aunt and why she conforms, although that would be a little bit more difficult. But you could definitely do it. That would be another character that you could discuss if you wanted. But both in this situation, the pressure is to conform and to have the same kind of conversion that everyone else has. And of course, he feels that because he didn't have this same kind of religious conversion, that he has not been saved, and that there is no Jesus as they have determined for him. Of course, he admits to it, though, and lies to everyone because he doesn't want to be left on the mourner's bench, which is the ironic part. So these are just some basic things. So we have to pick someone to talk about because, of course, we have to compare. We have to compare the crucible and salvation, and I have to decide, am I going to talk about conformity or nonconformity? So like I said, there are endless things you could argue, but for today, and because I personally feel the most pull with Proctor, not necessarily, but I'm just saying, giving you an example, we'll talk about Proctor and we'll talk about Langston Hughes, okay? And we're going to compare these two characters, and that's how we're going to answer this prompt. So the next thing you have to do is you have to talk about what you know about Proctor and how he either conforms or doesn't conform, and we have to talk about Hughes and how he either conforms or doesn't conform. And so this is another thought process. This would be like our third step, okay? Now I'm getting a lot more specific because one of the criteria of this is for me to specifically answer with logical organization the comparison between these two guys. So let's think about what I know about Proctor, and then I'll think about what I know about Hughes, and I'll see if I can come up with an idea based off of what I know about these guys. Well, Proctor must prove himself a Christian when court officials question him and wife. Okay? And we know that Hughes must prove himself converted or else disappoint his aunt, who's obviously very beloved to him, and stay on the mourner's bench, right? Now, don't kid yourself. This is not something that I just thought of in 1 second sitting right here, okay? And that's what a lot of kids think. I did some pre-work before I'm doing this because I don't want this video to be an hour long, all right? But you have to be willing to sit and think for a little bit, and a lot of students don't do that, which is the major flaw. And as a result, they're not very good writers because they haven't thought through this a little bit. This is also something that would come up in class. You're having a class discussion, and a lot of kids are not paying attention to these kinds of ideas that you talk about with your teacher, with your classmates, and that's precisely what you need to do if you want to speed up this process, okay? Otherwise, you can do it on your own. It's not too difficult. And so from these two things, from these two characters, I can look at this and what I know about them, and I can say, you know what? There is a commonality. There is something that I can compare about these two people, even though they're two totally different styles of writing, from and about a similar topic, but kind of have different points to them or different reasons for them writing. I can still draw a comparison. And the comparison might be something like this, that judgment from the community, which is more powerful than they are as an individual, is what is prompting conformity. And here I've now created a semblance of, a topic sentence in this case, because it's essentially a paragraph. I could even make this into a thesis. I could turn this into a 10-page paper if I wanted to. But now I've clearly answered the prompt, right? Judgment from the community is prompting conformity, because of course the original question is, draw comparisons on what is prompting conformity or nonconformity in both the Crucible and Salvation. I think this is a nice way to start attempting this prompt. Okay, so what we have right here, these two characters themselves are kind of like concrete details, okay, that are helping me make my point. This, of course, is like my topic sentence. This right here would be the beginning of some commentary. And I need to come up with some kind of concluding sentence that basically argues that these two are conforming. Because remember, I had to choose one, either conformity or nonconformity, and of course I'm choosing conformity. So let's go ahead and let's answer this thing. Oh, here, I'll put this over here. Okay. And so this would be something that I would write in both, the Crucible and Salvation, fear of communities, judgment prompts conformity. My first sentence is directly answering the prompt. Okay, it's like a little mini thesis here. Langston Hughes must proclaim his conversion, or else be considered doomed to hell. By his concerned aunt and congregation. I didn't capitalize the word aunt because I didn't call it as her name. That's just a common noun, okay? John Proctor is forced to prove himself a Christian according to court officials' standards, or else potentially face legal consequences. In both cases, that's my concluding sentence, the main characters conform in accordance to the ideals of the community. Okay? And this is 60 words. Okay? And like I said again, this is something that I have already pre-worked on. It's normal to have to think about these things. It's normal to have to work through it. The writing process would never normally be quite this fast. But if you do all the pre-work ahead of time, the writing process is a lot smoother. And you also save yourself a bad grade by at least coming up with some kind of organization and logic. So I hope this helped. And again, this is the writing process, breaking apart a prompt and successfully answer their prompt. Thanks.